Our first of this. Thank you so much. Got it. Yes, I got it. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the first of our 2022 series of talks on the science of autism. Let me just a couple of announcements before we get started. I'm looking forward to our speaker today. Next month, excuse me, our speaker is Celine Saunier, who is going to be talking about adaptive skills and teaching adaptive skills in autism. Celine is the current editor, author of the Vineland, which is the most widely used assessment instrument in the world, and it works on adaptive skills. And it'll be, I think, a very interesting talk for people because that's a real area, like this morning's talk, of great need for individuals on the autism spectrum. I wanted to mention for those of you who follow our website, in April, we're having an event as part of Autism Awareness Month. Also, at the end of April, on the 30th, we are reprising our driving event for students with autism who drive and individuals with autism who drive and would like to have a police traffic stop, a practice police traffic stop with real police cars, the whole 9 yards. Mary Jo has seen it in action. And we show them how to use the Blue Envelope, which is a new program in Connecticut for folks on the autism spectrum. It's especially important for students who commute to college and drive. We were just talking before we got started this morning about the number of students with ASD who, when they go to college or go to vocational school or other things, often they'll stay at home. So it means they either drive or take the train or the bus. Driving is far and away the easiest if you can master it. And it's a very good way for students to get experience dealing with the police and vice versa. That's our hidden subtext of the whole thing, which is also a great business. So by way of introduction, exercise in autism is a wonderful topic. Recreation in autism is a wonderful topic. And it's gotten to the point where in the last few years, it's been recognized as an evidence-based treatment. I was saying to Mary Jo this morning, I can remember publishing one of the first papers in the Journal of Autism that I edited on the positive benefits of exercise and autism on behavior. In folks with autism, it's now been very well replicated and extended, and it's now listed as one of the approved evidence-based treatment programs. So it's wonderful to have somebody talking about it who knows something about it. And it's also important because it's one of the areas which I think we probably need the most help in reaching out to people in schools and in communities, park and recreation services, to let them know there's not only some science out there, some practical techniques and some things you can work through. So I'm delighted this morning to have Mary Jo Archambault. My French is so, my wife would be so impressed. Who is the associate, I don't want to say, you're not the associate director, you're the program coordinator for recreation studies in our Department of Recreation Studies here at Southern. And she's going to be talking about some of her work and some of the work on recreational skills and autism. Mary Jo, it's all yours. And we'll have time for questions at the end. And as per usual, what will happen is people can be muted during the talk. You can ask questions, and then Eileen, our assistant, will take over, and she'll either ask the questions or let folks ask questions. So Mary Jo, it's all yours. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay, thank you so much for that great introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name, as Fred said, is Mary Jo Archambault, and I am a certified therapeutic recreation specialist, which for those of you who are not familiar with that therapy, we are a therapy that use recreation to help achieve our outcomes. And we also do a lot with educating people to overcome some of their barriers to recreation participation. So I'm very excited to be with you here today. And I'm trying to get my screen in. Oops. All right, I'll just do it like this. So today's objectives are really for us to look at some of the benefits of recreation and leisure engagement for individuals diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders. And I think almost more importantly, because the evidence is there that recreation engagement is important, but I think that we need to understand what are some of the barriers that individuals with ASD face, and what are some strategies perhaps for overcoming some of these barriers. And that's where we're going to be spending a good amount of our session today. So I'd like to get started today by sharing one of my favorite quotes on recreation. Recreation brings us joy. It challenges us, it engages us, it makes us better people. It may help us de-stress after a long day or allow us an opportunity to connect with others. Unfortunately, individuals with ASD are more likely to have limited recreational opportunities. Studies suggest that individuals with ASD may become more isolated in adulthood if they are not engaged in a healthy leisure lifestyle. And that's why one of today's focus is really looking at what are those barriers and how can we get individuals more engaged, especially within their community opportunities for recreation. So recreation participation provides a plethora of benefits to all of us. For individuals with ASD, the research has shown specific benefits related to decreased stress, which correlates to an increase in quality of life, an increase in social relationships and acceptance within one's community, a reduction in inappropriate and self-stimulatory behaviors, and an increase in physical and emotional well-being. So we will be discussing some of these in greater detail in the following slides. So the first study I want to talk about is this study from 2017. According to Oxford Languages, quality of life is the standard of health, comfort, and happiness experienced by an individual or group. All of us want a high quality of life. So in 2017, this research was done on 151 families who had at least one child with ASD. And the researchers found that recreation and leisure was a major contributor to both the quality of life for the child as well as the family. So if you look at this slide for a minute, only 50% of families replied that they were satisfied with their family's leisure and recreation. It's only 50%. But when you ask them how important recreation and leisure was to their family's quality of life, 86% rated this as very or quite important, with another 10%, so now we're up to 96, saying this was somewhat important. So I think, this goes to show you that recreation is not just important for the individual, but for the family as well. I can only guess that many of the choices that families make are based on the child's needs or the young adolescent or the young adult. But recreation and leisure is one choice that could benefit the family as a whole. Just the opportunity to engage in things that are fun and relaxing can add so much to one's quality of life. The next two studies that I just want to mention also focus on an increase in quality of life for the individual with ASD. So the first one, Garcia and Datillo, found that there was a decrease in stress and a significant increase in the 4 factors of quality of life that they measured. And those were life satisfaction, independence, competence, and social interaction. This study included 34 adults with ASD who were between the ages of 17 and 39. It was a year-long program that included a variety of recreational activities, including exercise, arts and crafts, games, attending events, and interacting with different medias. The second study, which was a little more recent in 2017, concluded that interventions and services that provide supports and opportunities for participation in recreation activities may help adults with ASD manage their stress level, leading to a better quality of life. So there's definitely research out there showing you that, you know what, recreation, participation, when done correctly with the right supports, can reduce stress and really help to improve the individual's quality of life. So the next area that I looked at was in studies relating to decreasing stereotyped and repetitive behaviors. So this was actually a systematic review of the literature. So these researchers looked at 9 studies related to physical activity and outcomes for individuals with ASD. The researchers found that in all 9 studies, an increase in physical activity led to a decrease in stereotyped and repetitive behaviors, and that in 2 of the studies, they additionally reported improved social and emotional functioning. Unfortunately, children with ASD tend to engage in less physical activity than what is nationally recommended, as well as less than their typically developing peers. The next area that we saw gains in were in social relationships and acceptance. So Coyne and Fullerton cited several researchers who found that recreation and leisure opportunities led to an increase in social relationships and acceptance by peers. Recreation connects people with common interest and may increase participation in the community, really serving as that bridge for community involvement, which is so important. Unfortunately, and the reason why I'm here today is that the majority of children, adolescents, and adults with ASD participate in fewer social and community recreation activities than individuals without ASD. So why is this? There are several barriers or constraints that individuals or families may face when planning for recreational activities, especially those that take place in the community. Sometimes it's just knowing like what's available, what supports are being offered. It's transportation. Okay, so how am I going to get there? Or how am I going to get my child there? Trying to fit recreation into an already busy schedule seems to be overwhelming at times. And then figuring out, like, is this something the individual is going to be doing alone? Will they be doing it with family or friends? You know, are there natural supports in the environment? And then the last one is, which is a significant barrier, is that sometimes individuals have had such a poor experience at a recreational program in the community that they are afraid to venture out again. So besides these exterior barriers, we also have some intrinsic barriers. Individuals with ASD may have characteristics that may also act as constraints to leisure. Take, for instance, the first one, social skills, which, if limited, may hinder an individual's ability to request items, access information, or may prevent them from fully engaging in the experience. So if we think about, even if the social demands of an activity are not high, so if you think about bowling, where the social demands, there does not have to be a lot of social interaction in bowling. But if an individual is unable to request the shoes and request a lane, they are not going to be able to participate. On the following slides, we will discuss some of the barriers listed on this slide and possible strategies to overcoming them. It's important before introducing an activity to really understand what the social demands are. Does the individual have to interact with others to be successful in this activity? Exactly how much interaction is going to be required? And are there clear times when we interact? So if you find an activity, so let's say that I'm an individual with ASD and I love basketball. But if being on the community basketball team or the basketball team at the YMCA is going to be too much for me socially, can we look at what's another way of playing basketball? All right, so I can shoot hoops by myself. I can play one-on-one. I can play horse with a couple of other people. So again, it's finding a version of an activity that has less social demands. So another barrier that was mentioned on that slide were restricted or repetitive behavior patterns, interests, or activities. So individuals with restricted interest may find it more challenging to develop leisure skills in a variety of areas. So a couple things that we can do: find activities that have repetitive actions to motivate engagement. And this is why there tends to be individuals tend to enjoy video games. The second one, finding structured classes or activities with specific routines. So an exercise class that starts off the same way and runs through the same pattern and ends the same way. Going to, a Tai Chi class, my yoga class is very structured. I know exactly what the next move is going to be. That can be very comforting for somebody with ASD. And then the last one, by incorporating activities along an individual's interest, this may promote engagement and a sustained interest in the activity. So for example, if someone's interest is they're really interested in trains, they could build model trains. They could paint trains or draw trains in an art class. They could go to museums where there are train exhibits. They could set up a model train track at their house. So really looking at what is the interest and how does that interest connect with a recreational activity. Sensory issues may either have a negative or a positive impact on recreation participation. Therefore, it is vital for you to understand any sensory sensitivities. So provide activities that contain the preferred sensory stimulation. So let's say the individual enjoys lifting or pushing heavy objects. Maybe CrossFit would be a good fit for that individual. If there is an attraction to cause and effect activities, that's where your electronics and computer games would come into play. If you were at last year's Springs conference, which I talked at, we looked at each of these characteristics and saw how they could be strengths in the right activity. By selecting activities that align with a person's strength, the person is more likely to enjoy and be successful in the activity. So when introducing new activities, it's important to keep in mind the feature of the activity might be more important than the activity itself. So what am I talking about? What are the features of an activity? Okay, so feature. I need concrete and clear rules. Finding activities that have these features. Checkers, chess. Most of your board games are going to have these very clear rules that we follow. Perhaps the feature is strong visual spatial ability. It could be puzzles, Legos, or blocks, which provide concrete experiences arranging objects in space, or it could be completing an obstacle course. The next one, I have a need for highly organized and structured. Again, that's where like a Zumba class, a line dance, a yoga class, regularly scheduled. So if you think of a swim team practice that is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 5 o'clock to 6:30, that's going to be more successful than having a swim team practice that's, let's see, Monday at 5, Wednesday before lunch, and then Friday morning. Really finding something that really has that regular scheduled time. And then the last one that I have here is active. So if I have a need to be active and I have difficulty waiting, activities such as hiking or cross-country skiing might be a good match. Limited communication, swimming might be great. So on this next slide, if you were working with someone or if you yourself started looking at, okay, so what are my preferences? What are the features that I want to find in an activity? So I want to find something that's outdoors, that there's limited social interaction, where I can do some walking, and I like repetition, and I really do well when there's a clear beginning and ending. Golf might be a good fit for this individual. So if you think about socialization is not really required in golf. You're going to be walking hole to hole. The repetition in golf, you walk to a hole, you take out your clubs, you hit the ball, put the clubs back into the bag. You now walk to the next hole and it starts all over again. And with golf, there's a clear beginning and an ending. I'm either doing 9 holes or I'm doing 18 holes. So this might be a good activity for someone with these preferences. Keeping in mind, you probably wouldn't want to go during a busy time if waiting is going to be difficult for me. So how do we facilitate successful recreation participation? We've already looked at how one's strengths may align with different activities. So now all we need to do is find out what the individual is interested in, find the right program in the community, ask the right questions, identify, provide the right supports, and whew, we're done. End of my presentation. Oh, if only it was that simple, but it really isn't. So let's look at the first thing we need to do, and that is assessing a person's interest. So as a recreational therapist, I tend to use a lot of questionnaires with the individuals I'm working with. However, with some individuals with ASD, answering questions may be quite difficult. So that might not be the way to go. So we could show pictures, right? So I could show pictures of different leisure activities and see if I can generate a response. The problem with pictures is that if a person has limited knowledge of recreational activities, they might not recognize what the picture is. And furthermore, if there's something in the picture, so if I have a picture of someone golfing, so I'm standing there with my golf clubs, I have my golf bag, and there's flowers. On my golf course, there are flowers. The individual might be fixating on the flowers in the picture and saying that they like the card, not the fact that they want to golf. So again, this could work, it could not work. You really have to know the individual who you are assessing. What tends to be very successful is using direct observation. So is the individual attracted to certain materials? So do I like things that are gushy? Do I like working with things that are very concrete? Do I prefer being active? Do I prefer being more passive? Do I enjoy arts and crafts? It's also important to observe how people interact with materials. So if I was to give everyone at today's session a deck of cards, some of you might start playing solitaire. Others of you might build a castle with the cards, right? Some of you might match up all of the red cards and all of the black cards. And still others of you might take the cards and line them up sequentially from 2 all the way through to ace. So really understanding, how is somebody interacting with this material? If I find that somebody is building with my cards, I'm going to be like, oh, visual spatial. That's the type of activities they enjoy doing. And the same thing with anything. So I give my child marbles to play with. Are they lining up the marbles according to size or colors? Are they shooting the marbles? Again, it's just going to give you a little bit of insight into what that individual's preference is. And of course, looking at, has the individual shown a preference for activities in the past? What do they prefer to do now? Do they prefer to do activities by themselves or with others? So after we have figured out what somebody's leisure interests are, we really need to look at the features of the activity to see if this is going to be successful or if this activity is going to be more of a challenge. Are there clear rules, such as a card game? Rather than going to a social at a teen center, what are the rules? What am I supposed to do when I come in? Is there a clear beginning and an ending? If the individual seeks out motor activities, can running or jumping or pushing be incorporated into the activity? That social interaction piece, you're going to be hearing me talk about it throughout this presentation because it's something important that we need to look at. Again, how much interaction is required, and is it clear when I need to react during this activity? Is there repetitiveness? What is the sensory feedback? Is this going to be positive, negative? Is waiting a requirement of this activity? So another thing that we really need to consider when introducing activities is that we want it to be sustainable, right? So I don't want to go through all this work finding an activity just to see that, it might be good for a one-time thing, but it's not going to be a lifetime activity. Looking at this slide, one of the important things is that we want to find activities that are enjoyed by same age peers so that that individual has an opportunity to develop relationships with people their own age. It's important to look to see, is this readily available in the community? And is there opportunity for participation in other areas, such as home, a community center, or school? So if you think about playing an instrument, so maybe I've decided that I want to play the flute. I can play the flute by myself at home. I can be a part of band and play the flute with others. So this is at school. And there might be a community group where I can play the flute or perhaps go for lessons. We want to make sure it's economically feasible. So I remember my own kids being in high school and wanting to join ski club. I'm like, for those of you that don't know, ski club is pretty expensive. You have to buy all the equipment, and then you have to make sure they have the right clothing to stay warm. Is this going to be feasible for this individual to keep up? Again, is it an interest of friends and family so that they can participate with the individual? But I almost think more importantly, it provides a topic for conversation. Can this be pursued as a lifelong leisure pursuit that individual can continue working on and mastering? And can it be engaged in alone or with others so that when I don't feel like being with a group of people, can I still engage in this activity? So is this activity right? Well, we've already assessed it's an activity of interest. So I think we're on the right track. Couple of other things that you might want to ask. Do I want to engage in, or do I want my child to engage in an inclusive setting? Okay, so where it's all members of the community, or do I want it to be a segregated setting, specifically for individuals with ASD? Really need to think about what is the goal of participating and what's the preference of the individual. Is staff trained and knowledgeable about ASD? Do they have an understanding of some of the characteristics and how they may manifest in recreational activities so that they don't overreact when they encounter a behavior? Is there an atmosphere of support and acceptance? Are activities cooperative or competitive? I kind of lean towards cooperative, where people are working together. And then the last question, is the environment appropriate or can it be modified? And we have a whole slide because there's a lot of things that you need to consider about this. So if you are a parent in today's presentation, you also need to think about, what are your needs? For those of you that have a child or an adolescent with ASD, you already may be feeling overwhelmed. And now you're here at this presentation and you're like, great. The research is there. I really should be trying to get my child into some recreational activities. How am I going to do this? So thinking about, how can your needs be met? So let me give you some examples. If your child is going to a yoga studio for a yoga class, is there another class that is appropriate for you at the same time? Perhaps a meditation class, or maybe a different yoga class, or maybe you're going to do yoga with your child. Where is the location of the activity? Is it near a park? Because perhaps when your child is in the activity, you can be running at the park, reading a good book. Are there activities that can allow all members of the family to participate? So remember the first research we looked at about quality of life. So, I think about going to, a ski lodge where one person might be taking lessons, another person might be on the bunny hill, somebody else might be on the diamond, not me. Someone might enjoy tubing, and somebody else might be in the lodge by the fire reading a good book. I work in a adaptive program, and we have this inclusive recreation night for individuals with a variety of disabilities, and for individuals without disabilities. So it's an inclusive recreation program. And I can tell you that one of the reasons why we have such good attendance is because the parents enjoy the program. Well, we are with the kids doing activities. The parents are in the back of the room and they are socializing. They are talking about, different barriers that have come up or different obstacles. and they're problem solving with each other. Like it's their support group. I almost think like the parents like that piece more than they like the activities itself. So really thinking about, for this to be sustainable, it needs to work for you. Never too old to do homework. And we need to do homework when finding the right program. So you can't just, blindly show up. And I'll tell you what happened at the program I worked at. We had a parent and a child show up. They knew that we had worked with participants with ASD before. Our philosophy of the program is basically that everyone should have an opportunity to participate in recreation. We are all about making a warm and supportive environment. They didn't ask about the number of participants or the staff ratio, and they showed up on a day when we were doing a holiday party. We had about 35 participants. We had 2 staff. Of those 35 participants, 20 were probably other parents. And this parent and child walked in, and it was way too overwhelming. So really doing your homework. What strategies have been used in the past to perhaps motivate engagement? What accommodations have you made? What accommodations are you willing to make? And, can I talk with your staff a little bit and tell them about some of my needs or my child's needs? And how do they handle behavior problems? And I'm not just talking about problems that an individual with ASD may have in the program. How do they handle bullying? So things to think about. So even if you've done all of your homework, you will still need to prepare the individual for this new experience and anticipate that there might be some challenges, even if the individual is looking forward to the activity. So, strategies for introducing new activities. I cannot say enough about visual supports, having a visual schedule, a social narrative. If appropriate, visiting the site prior. And I say if appropriate because if the individual during the visit thinks that this is the way the program is going to run and there's no other participants, they're going to be in for a rude awakening when they show up and there's 35 people, right? But really having a detailed idea of what is going to be happening from start to finish. How will I know when I'm finished? What do I do when I'm done? What do I do when there's a break? One of the things that I found when researching for this presentation was video modeling, where the individual views a video clip that they can imitate. So this has been used with success to teach children with ASD play skills, as well as to play the video game Guitar Hero. And even things such as having a check off list that can be completed for the individual participating would be helpful. So I told you we'd be talking about the environment, right? Here it is. The environment can have a major impact on whether or not the person will be successful. So when we're thinking about structure and consistency, is the schedule consistent? Do programs start on time? Is it going to be the same staff? What is the likelihood of the program being canceled? Will there be fire drills? I once had a guest speaker in one of my classes, and he worked specifically with individuals on the spectrum. And this was one of his first jobs in this area. And he said they would do community programs. So everything was going great until there was a snowstorm, kind of like today, right? A little ice storm. And the program had to be canceled. And his participants were so upset. So he said what that taught him to do was, really if the program was going to happen on a Friday, like today, Monday, he'd start looking at the weather and start preparing them that there is a chance that our program on Friday is going to be canceled, and then looking at what are some things that they could do at home. So that's your structure and consistency. Looking at procedures. What do I have to do if I need to use the bathroom? Do I raise my hand? Do I need to go with a staff if I leave the room, or do I just go to the bathroom? If I'm in an art class, or now what's really big are these like paint and sip things, they're all over. What happens if I run out of supplies? Like, what's the procedure for getting more supplies? So really doing some problem solving to help that person be more independent and feel more comfortable. And then looking at environmental stimuli. So are we going to be sharing materials? Are we going to be sitting in close proximity? Are there fans in the building? Are there loudspeakers, whistles, bells, unexpected sounds? What's the temperatures? What's the aroma? So after you have done a thorough exploration of the environment, it's going to be important to determine some accommodations or modifications needed. So is there a quiet space where I can go or my child can go if they need that? Can they wear headphones for noise during the program? Are headphones provided? These bright overhead lights, this isn't going to work. Is it okay if my child wears a baseball cap inside to protect them from that bright light? Can they have access to fidgets during the program? How do you prepare participants for transitions from one activity to the next? What visual information is provided? Can we provide visual information? And then what is the timeline for completing the activity? So if I go to one of these paint and sip classes, do I need to complete the painting in one sitting? Or will I be working on this the next time I'm there? So it would be great if the recreation provider asked all the right questions, but unfortunately, this is often not the case. Be prepared to share the supports needed. So I've kind of given you a template to use. And I think one of the worst things you can do is not disclose that the individual has ASD, or I have ASD, and needs supports. I have been in the field of recreation for 27 years. And I've sat on the board for Connecticut Park and Recreation Association. And in my interactions with people who work in parks and recreation, one of the most frustrating things for them is that parents don't identify that their child has autism and what the needs are. And I remember one park and recreation director saying, you know, second day of camp and this kid just goes running off, and we had no clue. Come to find out, the child had autism. The parents didn't want the child being labeled in the program. And maybe there were some good reasons why that family felt like, you know what, I don't want to disclose. But for successful participation, wouldn't it be better to have those supports in place? Something to think about. So what you would want from your recreation provider is for them to provide feedback, specific feedback as to what that person is doing well within the recreation activity, or if they're not doing something well. So if I'm exercising wrong, if I'm in yoga and I'm not doing the right pose and I could hurt myself, I want somebody giving me that feedback. It's important to highlight natural cues in the environment. So for instance, in baseball, I know that when the team gets 3 outs, we're going to switch sides. That's a natural cue. At school, the bell rings. It's a natural cue that I have 4 minutes to get to my class. Asking the recreation site to provide visual sequencing and support, telling them the importance of literal and clear directions, and letting them know, like, what are some of the stressors and how they can reduce the stress. One way to reduce the stress is really being clear about what's going to be happening in the program. So there are definitely some qualities that make leisure materials and activities more successful. You don't want an activity to be too easy. You want it to be challenging without being overstimulating. So making sure it's suitable for the person's ability level. We've talked about social interaction, so understanding what those demands are. And, providing opportunities for ongoing practice so that that individual has a sense of control or mastery over this recreation activity. So for a young adult or adolescent, it is important to think about other skills required for independent recreation participation. So things to consider: transportation, will the individual be getting their license? Do they know where to park? Will they need to access public transportation? Will they need to, do they have an Uber app that they can use? What about making purchases? So are they comfortable renting those shoes for bowling? Um, are they comfortable knowing how much money they have budgeted for going out to eat? How do you prepare for the activity? So if I'm going to a yoga class, do I need to bring a mat? Do I need to bring a water bottle? What should I wear? Shouldn't be wearing jeans, right? So I need to have some comfortable pants on. Probably should make sure my socks are clean because I got to take those off. I'm going to have bare feet on the mat. It's important to be able to keep track of time. So if I'm going out to dinner and then going to a movie, what time do I need to be done eating so I can get to the movie? Having an awareness of when is time for leisure, and then being able to initiate, wow, Saturday is my free day. I am going to go bowling. And how do I start doing that? And then problem solving, thinking about some things during the activity, like we talked about the running out of paint. Um, how do I ask for more paint? So what are some problems within that activity? So in conclusion, recreation is good for you. It's good for all of us, and especially for individuals with ASD. Studies have found a decrease in challenging behaviors when an individual engages in personally satisfying leisure activities. So it's important that we create a balanced leisure lifestyle. I talked today a lot about community. I do most of my leisure at home, but having that balance of recreation within the community, recreation within my own home is important. Fostering and using natural supports to support recreation participation. That could be family, coworkers, and friends. And then most importantly, making needs known so that the individual can be as successful as possible and have a good experience. So thank you all very much. I hope you found this presentation helpful. And, with the slides, which I believe are posted, I have like over, I have 3 pages full of references. So if there's more information that you're looking to gather, please know that there's references there to support that. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Mary Jo. We haven't had any questions come in. We did have a comment from a parent, so I'm going to pose it to you. I don't know if you see it in the chat, but something, I'm assuming a parent. I apologize if you're not, but they have commented that many programs are not willing to take campers with ASD or medical issues because they don't have the extra staffing, and that could be a big reason why people are not fully disclosing. Any suggestions for them?
I really think being open and transparent and talking to them about, listen, like with these supports, my child is going to be fine. And, the flip side of this is I don't know if I would want my child going to a place where they didn't feel that they wanted to accommodate him. So it's kind of a two-sided. I think one side, when people are afraid of the unknown, I think if you could set up a meeting with them and say, listen, these are my child's needs. This is, this is these are the supports that my child receives in school. I'm hoping to get those same supports because it really helps him to be successful. So I'm not sure if that answered your comment.
I think along those lines, somebody's asking if you know of any resources or quote unquote clearinghouses for specific ASD friendly activities.
Resources. Oh, so as a recreation provider?
Yeah.
I have, in my references, there was a couple of really good books, especially like Coin, and really talking about developing those leisure time skills for people. I thought like the resources that were provided were just great. Some of the other resources I would recommend, like looking at what's out there for leisure education. So Datillo, he does leisure education program planning, which depending on, well, really, I was going to say depending on the age of the individual, but you could adapt some of the activities as well. But off the top of my head, I don't have anything else that's really just specific for individuals with ASD. You could also try reaching out to like Autism Families of Connecticut. I know one of my colleagues who's a certified recreational therapist works there. So she might be someone else that might have more specific materials.
It seems like there's a bit of a thread going through the comments, through the chat, that people are running into barriers and struggles with finding activities for their children, and not being welcomed by the activities, not getting phone calls back, not having that interaction. It seems like there's quite a bit of a struggle.
I'm trying to I'm reading through some of these. That's just it's so frustrating.
Oh, but Sarah from Chapel Haven has just commented that Chapel Haven and New Haven, they have some very comprehensive rec programs, virtually and in person, if you're based in New Haven.
And Marrakesh is in Hamden, and they also have programs. So that's another good resource. Is there a list of all the recreational therapists in Connecticut? No, there is not a, I wish there was, but there is not. I know like there's recreational therapists working at Edelbrook. There's a recreational therapist that was on staff at Ben Haven. Working, I believe she's still there working once a week as well.
Fred, you're not muted.
Oh, good. Thank you. This was fantastic, Marjo. I was just going to throw in my 2 cents, which is some of these things you've heard. There are some of the special needs schools that have people who are really very good. The gym teacher at Ben Haven is just a fantastic guy who I think on the weekends goes out and does as a volunteer some activities. Sometimes the things that you can look for are things, as Mary Jo was mentioning, that are kind of more individualistic by nature. Also things that are rule governed and progressive, I've often found. So things like, for example, martial arts, where you start very basic, and there's a lot of one-on-one, even when it's on a group, you're working with a teacher, but you're watching the other kids and there's rules and it goes very slowly. Suzuki Music, they pride themselves, or they should, on being very developmental, going very slowly, starting very simple and then going up there. But things like that can sometimes be good. I think the trouble with not disclosing, as Mary Jo was saying, is that people often know very quickly and wonder why you didn't tell them. And then you got a different problem to deal with. So I think it is good for parents to have at least a discussion, and without getting into all the nitty gritty of it, to even say that Jimmy has troubles with loud noises or whatever it is. But I wouldn't just sort of spring it on somebody with no notice. And there are some special needs camps around. I'm trying to remember the names of all of them. Oh gosh.
I think Wallingford Park and Rec has a good program.
Wallingford has a great program, and there's some sleepaway camps, believe it or not. And the names will come to me, and I can find the names up for people, but there are some camps around that can be good. But this is such an important area because it's so easy for kids on the spectrum to, they've had a long day in school, they come home and they isolate and they eat their Doritos in front of the TV, and they don't have opportunities for recreation, and they get overweight, and that puts them at risk for medical problems. So this is such a critically important area, and you did such a great job of outlining all the various sides of it, of kind of thinking about the tasks, thinking about the person and the situation. So this was really a great talk.
And one of the things that's really exciting is that the my department, which is Recreation, Tourism, and Sport Management, they have a new building that's being built. So if you're familiar with Southern's campus, we have a new building that's coming up, and we're going to have our own room, and we are going to be doing program for individuals who are on the spectrum. So that's not going to be happening. The building's still not ready. We're hoping that by summer it's ready. If you are all on the mailing list, which I'm sure people are, right? The email list, that's definitely something that once our programs start, they will be overseen by certified recreational therapists, such as myself and a few of my colleagues, and we will be having students facilitating groups. So hopefully this is something that will be beneficial for you and your families.
Great.
A question for what you were just talking about. Will those programs be for adults only or children?
Both.
Both. Wonderful.
We actually find a need for children, like so for some children that are in transitional programs, right? That go until they're 22. And then it's kind of like, what do they do afterwards? And they still don't have those independent skills for recreation functioning. Like, we'll be focusing on that group, but definitely younger kids as well as older adults. The D&D group at Dragon Haven, he was actually one of my former students, and yeah, so he is facilitating that program. So thank you, Monica, for reminding me about that one.
And somebody did comment, Camp Harkness is a camp for students.
Great. So I think we're about time. Mary Jo, thank you so much. This was a fantastic talk. And again, I want to remind people, please tune in next month. We're going to have Celine Saunier talking about adaptive skills. Celine's the current author of the Violent Adaptive Behavior Skills. So it's a nice follow-up to this as we're thinking about topics that are really important, but unfortunately are not often very critically addressed. And then we have some other things coming up. We have our April conference. And so that's taking the place of our Science of Autism talk that month. But then in May, we're going to have a talk on social policy and things about barriers to implementation of evidence-based practice. So a number of really good talks. So I want to thank everyone for coming, and especially to thank Mary Jo this morning. This was fantastic. Thank you, Mary Jo.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for giving me your time today.
It was really, really great. Great.